Let's see. Our scripture reading today is from the book of Matthew, chapters 5, verse 33 to 37. Okay, thank you. It wasn't on my phone right here. Okay. Again, you have heard that our ancestors were told, "Don't break your vow, fulfill all oaths made to our God." But I tell you not to swear oaths at all. Don't swear by heaven, for it is God's throne. Don't swear by the earth, for it is God's footstool. Don't swear by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great ruler. And don't swear by your own head, for you can't make a single hair white or black. Say yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no. Anything beyond that is from the evil one.
When it became obvious that politics were going to go a certain way in the country, I thought it'd be good to get really down to the basics of Christianity, to do the Sermon on the Mount, and that's why that was chosen, to understand the principles, to realize that in many ways the church was born out of times like this, where there were oppressed people, and Christianity was a way of understanding humankind as our larger family. That kind of got lost along the way. But I still think that this going through and remembering what Jesus taught is a really good way of not sinking into despair. We have some tough struggles ahead. And I think if we can not lose the connection between our spiritual path, standing up for the poor. If we can realize that this day of reckoning has been coming for a long time. And I don't think our leaders on either side cared enough to make the kind of radical changes that would have prevented this. So somehow we've gone from Jimmy Carter, Thomas Jefferson, to Giuliani, Roger Stone, and Hulk Hogan. So it's not a total loss. But I don't think we need to choose despair, and I think that it's a bad mistake to do that in the first place. As I've said, for 30 years, this economic system will implode, right? I mean, I've been trying to say that for a long, long, long time. Capitalism will implode. That's not saying take pieces of it. If you're ethical, the survival of the species. What are the ultimate values that a human being, a sane human being, holds? I think when we look at the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is trying to walk us through that. Jesus is not the only one that did this, Humanity 101. But the Sermon on the Mount is that, and the fact that the church, so much of the church jettisoned the Sermon on the Mount and chose the Apostles' Creed, chose dogma. Set us up for this day. In some ways, it's a relief that it's here. We begin working on the foundation. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to turn around overnight. But you can spend your life working for the noblest goal, that is to help our species find its greatness. And the only way that's going to happen is if we are the examples of that. Just saying whose fault this is not going to be as helpful as having a life where you'll have peace and joy, working for better options. I've said it before, this problem did not arrive with Donald Trump. It came over on the Mayflower. And when you look at how we have treated women, we being, the people of privilege in this country, the people of color, the people without property. When you have a property rights system, when you have a whole continent full of resources, that seems really like a wonderful system. But when you run out of property, then there's some people that are born without human rights. And Americans are going to have to decide whether we believe this thing, that every human being has an inalienable right to life, liberty, pursuit, and happiness. Because that's not capitalism. That's not capitalism. Capitalism says you have those rights if you can earn them. This nation, supposedly, in terms of our principle and the game that we talked, we founded the nation on human rights and an aspiration that every person might live with dignity and hope. I want to suggest that that's worth living our life for. Think of your greatest heroes in life. I bet they came along at a time like this. So I hope you will see this, not as a time of despair, but an invitation to greatness. Become an example of the kind of humanity that every person at some level aspires to. I think a lot of what we're seeing is just despair that was already there, depression, nihilism, that there was no hope, there was no way out. And so they sold out. I don't know how somebody can follow. I mean, it's one thing to vote for Donald Trump. If you just hate what the Democrats are doing, I get that. But to defend the lies requires a renunciation of Jesus Christ. To buy into the lies. And there's no question that they're lies. This week, the incoming president said there was a shooting. He said, when I said the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true. But both of the terrorists that he was talking about were born in the United States. Both served in the military. My understanding is they both had problems with relationships. I kind of think that's the demographic we're talking about. Wounded people who were used by this country and then thrown away. If you are a follower of Donald Trump and you've spread that lie, will you please apologize to the people that you passed the lie to? How you vote, that's not my job. But when you betray humankind, that is my job. I would like everybody to feel comfortable here. But without justice, there'll be no peace. So appeals to peace, even appeals to kindness, when oppression reigns, are delusional. We have to lift up our ability to love, and that will lead us to justice, but also to peace and to joy. I think what Jesus is talking about in this passage, remember Jesus? I was going to talk about him at some point. I'm kind of prejudiced because I'm a Presbyterian minister, but it seems to me the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about the kinds of problems that humankind has always fallen into, and also the way out. He was not talking about the institutional church. He wasn't talking about the Bible. The institutional church didn't exist. The Bible wasn't compiled. He's talking about your humanity. In Taoism, there's a wonderful saying where it goes, when the way is lost, when the Tao is lost, this path, when the path is lost, there's goodness. When goodness is lost, there's morality. When morality is lost, there's ritual. Ritual is the shell of faith, the beginning of chaos. I think what Jesus is saying is the less we speak from our hearts, the more we get into creeds and pledges of allegiance, the further we get from the authentic truth that would help us recognize our human family when we run across them. This is not a time of despair. These are not going to be wasted years. These can be some of the best teaching times. Not that I would choose that. I'm not saying it's what I would have chosen. But we've been headed this way for a long time. And if you're a person of privilege, you are willing for other people to get this treatment. You are high enough on the food chain where you're okay with immigrants being on the menu. You're okay with the working poor being on the menu. You've been invited to your human family. And that's what the gospel is all about. When Jesus called God Heavenly Parent, he was saying that all of humankind is a family. The first thing he said was, you've heard in the past, don't break your oaths, don't swear falsely. This section of the Sermon on the Mount, we took the Christmas break, so it's been a little while. But what he's doing in this section is saying, you've heard in the past, and then he gives one of the 10 Commandments, or one of the great central teachings. He says, this is what you were taught. Don't swear falsely. I'm telling you, don't swear at all. In each case, he's taking us deeper to go away from the rules. Jesus was not a conservative. Jesus was a revolutionary. And the gospel is a call to revolutionary human rights, kindness, and love. To be conservative about it is to misunderstand what it is. I ran across a great quote this week. I really liked it. Except for I didn't write the name down. This really smart person. Last name is Hendricks. It's like Aubrey Hendricks. We'll get that on the written version of this. He says, in our time when so many seem to think that Christianity goes hand in hand with right-wing visions of the world, it is important to remember that there has never been a conservative prophet. Yeah. No prophet's ever come here and said, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Great job. Don't let those other people come over here and take any of it. He goes, prophets have never been called to conserve social orders that have stratified inequities of power and privilege and wealth. Prophets have always been called to change them so that all can have access to the fullest fruits of life. In fact, it was the conservative forces, those who wanted to keep things as they were, that in every instance were the most bitter opponents of the prophets and their mission for justice. I think when the early church talked about the Antichrist, I don't think they were talking about a reptilian monster. I think they were talking about an institutional church that no longer has the Sermon on the Mount at the center, that no longer teaches what Jesus taught. Instead of forgiveness, they teach judgment. instead of a redistribution of the world's wealth, which is central. That is central to understanding the gospel. They teach blessings. And you can hoard wealth and still follow Jesus. Not true. I did kind of a disturbing study this week where I looked at what were the oaths leading up to the Hitler movement. In 1918 to 1933, their Pledge of Allegiance said, "I swear loyalty to the Reich's Constitution and pledge." It went on like that. Then in 33, they changed it. "I swear by God this holy oath that I want to ever loyally and sincerely serve my people and the fatherland and be prepared as a brave and obedient soldier to risk my life for this oath at any time." Then in 35, it had another tweak to it. "I swear by God this holy oath that I shall render unconditional obedience to the leader of the German Reich and people, Adolf Hitler, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces." Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is an equivalent, but I'm saying this is the road to fascism. I don't care who that one person is. Democracy cannot be centered on one person. And when you see when the election was over and people said, "Daddy's coming home," fine if you're a child, that's fine. But that's not democracy. So the first thing Jesus says is, you've heard a rule, and I'm telling you that it's a principle. And the principle has to be loving, it has to be wise. Then I don't think he was saying that all oaths are bad. I'm doing a wedding this weekend. That's a vow. That's an oath. There are some good oaths and vows, but that's not the sinews of humankind. The sinews of humankind is authentic communication. But it's so easy for communication to fall out of that level and get caught in habits and routines. I saw something in our kitchen that I really loved. It's called Joy Waffle. Joy Waffles. And it's by St. Jude, so it's a good cause. But their motto is believe. Believe what? Yeah. When you pledge allegiance to the flag, does it matter at all who's waving it? I kind of think it does. I kind of think you need to know that first. But the church has taught people that belief is holding on to things in spite of evidence. I don't think that's what Jesus taught. What kind of version of truth requires dishonesty? When you teach a child to say the Apostles' Creed, I think it borders on child abuse. To get a child to lie and say, "I know that Jesus was born of a virgin. I know Jesus raised from the dead." No wonder the church fills up with hypocrisy. We teach it coming out of the gate. Pretend, wear this mask. And the people love it. Jesus, his whole teaching is take the mask off. Even as a child, I knew the Pledge of Allegiance is stupid. It's just stupid. My mom always said, don't use the word stupid, but I'll deal with her later. She died a while back, so. What does it mean to pledge allegiance to a flag? What does that even mean? I pledge allegiance to the flag and the pole on which it flies, and the nation of China where it was made, And the whole premise is that if there's a traitor in the group, they'll say, I can't say that. Or that you're loving the country by saying an oath or a vow. If we all say the same words again, then we're unity. Jesus is saying, no, you're not. Speak from your heart. It's very uncomfortable, and there's a lot of work to have to do, but that's where it starts. Religious language and jargon may sound more holy. Patriotic jargon may sound more loyal, but it's not true. We have to be authentic. I like this song that Jackson Brown. It's about finding yourself, finding your true voice. He says, gather your deeds and your possessions, whatever certainty you've known. Forget your heroes. You don't really need those last few lessons. Stand in the open. The next voice you hear will be your own. Can our church lead people, particularly children, to their own voice? Or do we want to put pre-recorded messages in their psyche? I think Jesus is very clear on this. Then the last thing I want to point out from this short little blurb about oaths is I believe he's talking about speaking from your heart. And this can be very difficult because sometimes what your heart is feeling is confusion, doubt, despair. But that's the true foundation for who you are. Have you ever been to like a movie theater and the projector was out of focus? That's what confusion is. Confusion is when you have a lot of swirling ideas and they need to gestate. They need to settle into clarity. But if you've been told to never doubt, to never question, that's not going to happen. The most courageous thing you can do is to be authentically who you are. It's also the most revolutionary thing you can do. To not walk lockstep with your culture, whatever it is. America's not worse than other countries. We're just so powerful that our stupidity hurts people. Our comfort zone means death for people all over the world. Jesus calls us out of that. Not out of America, we have to leave the United States, but out of that littleness of vision. In addition to be a good citizen of the United States, you have to be a good citizen of the world and of the web of life. That we have to be in tune with everything and everybody. We started getting in trouble. I started getting in trouble in the church pretty early on. And I remember it was for me, a scary time to have people stand up and say, shut up. Like in seminary, we didn't study that. We had somebody stand up and ask for a resignation at the end of the sermon. And I'll never forget the look of horror on people's faces when I said, I don't know. Because that's not what a minister is supposed to do. A minister is supposed to be a mask. Part mask, part Lucky Charm. I'll come bless your house, bless your garage. The demons will stay away. But I remember one day realizing, I'm just a person. I don't know all of the answers. And I developed a kind of credo. And it's, I don't know if what I'm saying is right, but I know if I'm being honest or not. And I made a pledge, even before I met a lot of you, to always be as honest as I can be in sermons. And trust you to realize when I'm full of beans. The song has a second verse about finding our voice. It says, well, they knew how they could hurt you, and you let them cut you to the bone. But God forbid you allow them to rid you of your virtue. Forget their laughter. The next voice you hear will be your own. The purpose of this series has been and will be to invite you not to choose despair, to remember that you've got heroes and sheroes who were born into times like this. And their courage is what has inspired you to be here. This is your call to nobility. This is your call to heroism. This is your call to nobility and to joy. We all die. Nobody lives forever. Our choice then is whether to die for something or of something. Jesus calls us to live for radical, universal love. And I can't think of a higher calling than that. It changes in details. But I think what he's saying is to do that, you have to take off the mask, as terrifying as that is. The mask of certainty, the mask of pretense, the mask of dogma. Just open up your heart and speak from your heart. It's the second thing he said. What a prophet does that most of us don't do is separate what's true from what they want to be true. When we look at the world through what we want to be true, we have cataracts spiritually. To realize that however painful this time is, you have a courage and a depth that will get you through this. But pretending, saying creeds, saying oaths, wearing masks, that's not going to make it safer. Most of humankind has been in this situation. And what we've lost is our hiding place from injustice. So to take this up as a torch and to realize that this does not need to be a wasted 4 years. It could be a coming home if we go deep enough and true enough. I'll let Jackson Brown have the last words. Throw down your truth and check your weapons. Don't look to see if you're alone. Just stand your ground. Don't turn around whatever happens. Don't ask directions. The next voice you hear will be your own. We'll take a moment now for you to contemplate your own understanding of these words.